The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the general store, and Yates Patterson watched from across the dusty street as the driver climbed down to help his only passenger descend. A young woman who moved with deliberate care, her left leg dragging slightly as she accepted a polished walking stick from inside the coach. Muskogee, Indian Territory, in the summer of 1887 was no place for a woman traveling alone, especially one with an obvious injury. Yates had been leaning against the post outside the saloon, taking a break from his work at the cattle ranch just outside town, when something about her careful movements made him straighten up. She wore a simple blue dress that had seen better days, her dark hair pulled back in a practical bun. And even from this distance, he could see the determined set of her jaw as she refused the driver's offered arm and instead planted her walking stick firmly in the red dirt. "Thank you kindly, but I can manage," she said, her voice carrying across the street with a clarity that suggested she was used to asserting her independence. The driver shrugged, handed down a worn carpet bag, collected his payment and climbed back onto his perch. Within moments, the coach was rolling away in a cloud of dust, leaving the woman standing alone in the center of town. She looked around slowly, taking in the saloon, the general store, the small church at the end of the street, and the various other buildings that made up the modest settlement. Her gaze passed over Yates without particular interest, and he found himself wondering what had brought her here. He was 24 years old, had been working cattle since he was 14, and had seen plenty of people come and go through Muskogee. Most were passing through on their way to somewhere else. A few stayed. Something told him this woman might be one of the latter, though he could not say why he thought so. She picked up her bag and began walking toward the general store, her gait uneven but steady. The walking stick clicked against the wooden planks as she stepped up onto the boardwalk. Yates watched as she paused to catch her breath before pushing open the door. Through the window, he could see old Mrs. Henderson look up from behind the counter, her expression shifting from surprise to concern. Yates pushed off from the post and crossed the street without quite knowing why. Maybe it was the way she had refused help, but still looked like she needed it. Maybe it was the stubborn tilt of her chin that reminded him of his mother, who had raised him alone after his father died in the war. Maybe it was just that he had always had a soft spot for things that were broken but still fighting. The bell above the door chimed as he entered the store. The woman was standing at the counter, explaining something to Mrs. Henderson in a low voice. Up close, he could see she was younger than he had first thought, probably only 20 or 21, with clear gray eyes and a scattering of freckles across her nose. Her face was drawn with fatigue, and he noticed the way she was leaning heavily on her walking stick. "I am looking for work," she was saying. "Anything honest. I can read and write. I can keep accounts. I can sew, cook, clean, teach if needed." Mrs. Henderson looked doubtful. "Well now, miss, I do not know. Things are tight around here, and most folks looking to hire want someone who can do heavy labor." "I can work," the woman insisted. "My leg is weak, but I am not helpless." "I did not mean to suggest you were, dear. It is just that, well, you understand how it is." Yates cleared his throat. Both women turned to look at him. "Excuse me, madam," he said, addressing the newcomer. "I could not help but overhear. My boss at the ranch, Sam Thornton, has been looking for someone to help his wife with the house. She is expecting their 4th child and having a hard time of it. The job would be cooking, cleaning, maybe teaching the older children their letters. The pay is not much, but it comes with room and board." The woman's eyes lit up, then immediately became guarded. Why would you offer this to a stranger? It was a fair question. Yates considered his answer carefully. "Because my mama raised me to help folks when I can, and because you look like someone who needs a chance but would not ask for charity." This is work, honest work, and you would be earning your keep. Mrs. Thornton really does need the help." She studied him for a long moment, those gray eyes searching his face for any sign of deception or ulterior motive. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she gave a small nod. "My name is Katherine Vaughn," she said, "and I would be grateful for the opportunity." "Yates Patterson," he replied, touching the brim of his hat. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Vaughn. The ranch is about 5 miles out of town. I was just about to head back. If you would like, I can take you out there now, introduce you to the Thorntons." Katherine hesitated, glancing down at her carpet-bag. "I do not want to impose on your time." "No imposition. I have a wagon just down the street." Mrs. Henderson had been watching this exchange with interest. "The Thorntons are good people, dear," she offered. "You could do a lot worse in this territory." That seemed to settle it for Katherine. She picked up her bag, though Yates was quick to reach for it. "I can carry it," she protested. "I know you can," he said gently. "But I am heading the same direction, so I might as well." For a moment he thought she would argue, but then she released her grip on the bag. "Thank you." They walked out to his wagon together, her pace slow but steady. Yates found himself matching his stride to hers naturally, not rushing, not offering his arm, but staying close enough that she could reach out if she needed to. He loaded her bag into the back and then offered his hand to help her up onto the seat. This time, she took it without protest, and he felt the slight tremor in her fingers that spoke of exhaustion. Once they were both settled and he had started the horses moving, he glanced over at her. "You come far, far enough," she said, then after a pause added, "from Arkansas. Little town you would not have heard of. What brings you to Indian Territory?" She was quiet for so long he thought she would not answer. Finally, she said, "A fresh start. Sometimes a person needs to leave everything behind and begin again." There was pain in her voice, old pain that had settled deep. Yates knew better than to pry. Everyone out here had a story, and most of those stories involved leaving something behind. "Well, Muskogee is a good place for fresh starts," he said. "It is not much, but folks are decent for the most part. The territory is still finding its feet, lots of people trying to build something new." She nodded, looking out at the rolling prairie that stretched in all directions. "How did you come to be here?" "Born not far from here, actually. My father went off to fight for the Union when I was small, never came back. My mother worked herself to the bone to keep us fed. She died when I was 14, and Sam Thornton took me on at the ranch. Been there ever since." "I am sorry about your parents. Thank you. It was a long time ago." He flicked the reins gently. "Can I ask what happened to your leg? You do not have to tell me if you would rather not." Katherine was silent again, and he thought he had overstepped, but then she spoke, her voice carefully even. "A horse fell on me when I was 16, crushed my hip and leg. The doctor said I would never walk again, but I am stubborn." "I can see that," Yates said with a small smile. "Takes a lot of strength to prove doctors wrong." "It takes a lot of strength to keep going every day," she corrected quietly. "Some days I am not sure I have it, but you do keep going. That is what matters." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and something shifted in her expression. "You are kind." "I try to be." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the wagon wheels creaking steadily, the horses plodding along the familiar road. The sun was warm but not oppressive, and a breeze carried the scent of prairie grass and wildflowers. Yates found himself acutely aware of Katherine beside him, the way she held herself upright despite her obvious exhaustion, the way she took in everything around her with those observant gray eyes. "There it is," he said as the ranch buildings came into view. The Thornton place. It was a modest spread, a main house with a wide porch, a barn, a couple of smaller outbuildings, and a bunkhouse where Yates and the other ranch hands slept. Cattle dotted the nearby fields and chickens scratched in the yard. As they pulled up, Sam Thornton emerged from the barn, a tall man in his 40s with weathered skin and kind eyes. "Back already, Yates," he called, then noticed Katherine. "And who is this?" Yates hopped down and went around to help Katherine descend. She took his hand again, using her walking stick to steady herself as she climbed down. "Mr. Thornton, this is Miss Katherine Vaughn. She just arrived in town looking for work. I remembered you saying Mrs. Thornton could use some help, so I brought her out to meet you." Sam looked surprised but not displeased. He came forward, wiping his hands on his pants. "Is that so? Well, Miss Vaughn, it is a pleasure to meet you. My wife Sarah has been feeling poorly with this pregnancy, and we have been struggling to keep up with everything. Can you cook?" "Yes, sir. And clean, so teach children their letters. The pay would be $5 a month plus room and board. You would have your own room in the house. Hours are long, but we are not unreasonable folks." Katherine straightened as much as she could. "I will work hard, Mr. Thornton. My leg does not stop me from doing what needs to be done." Sam glanced at the walking stick but nodded. "I do not doubt it. Yates here would not have brought you if he did not think you could handle it. Come on, let me introduce you to Sarah." The house was neat but clearly showing signs of neglect. Dishes piled in the kitchen, dust on the furniture, laundry waiting to be done. Sarah Thornton was lying on a sofa in the front room, her belly large with pregnancy, her face pale and drawn. 3 children, ranging from about 8 years old down to 3, were playing quietly in the corner. "Sarah, this is Miss Katherine Vaughn," Sam said gently. "She is looking for work, and Yates brought her out." Sarah's face lit up with something like hope. "Oh, truly, Miss Vaughn, can you really cook and clean?" "Yes, madam, and I would be happy to help with the children as well. When can you start?" Katherine smiled, the first real smile Yates had seen from her. "Right now, if you like." Sarah actually teared up. "You are an angel, an absolute angel." While Sam showed Katherine to the small room off the kitchen that would be hers, Yates took care of unhitching the horses. He told himself he had done a good deed, helped out his boss and given a woman in need a chance. But he could not quite shake the image of Katherine's face from his mind. The way the late afternoon light had caught in her hair, the strength in her eyes despite the pain he could see she carried. Over the next few weeks, Yates found reasons to be around the house more than usual. He would volunteer to fix things that did not really need fixing, or he would time his meals to coincide with when Katherine would be serving the family. He watched as she transformed the Thornton household, bringing order out of chaos with quiet efficiency. The children took to her immediately, especially the oldest, a girl named Emma who followed Katherine around like a puppy. Katherine moved through her days with steady determination, her walking stick always close at hand. Yates noticed she was in pain more often than she let on. The way she would pause and close her eyes briefly when she thought no one was looking, the careful way she lowered herself into chairs. But she never complained, never asked for special consideration. One evening, about 3 weeks after her arrival, Yates was sitting on the porch after supper when Katherine came out with a cup of coffee. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I thought you might like this," she said, offering him the cup. "Thank you." He took it, surprised and pleased. "Will you sit with me?" She hesitated, then settled onto the porch steps, her walking stick propped beside her. They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, watching the day fade into twilight. "You have been very kind to me," Katherine said finally. "I wanted to thank you properly. If you had not offered to bring me here, I do not know what I would have done. I am just glad it worked out. You have been good for the Thorntons. Sarah looks better than she has in months, and the house has never run smoother. They are good people. I am lucky to have found this place." She paused. "To have been found, I suppose. You found me. I just pointed you in the right direction." "It was more than that, and you know it." She looked at him directly. "You took a chance on a stranger with a limp and no references. Most people would not have done that." Yates met her eyes. "Most people are fools, then." "Anyone with eyes could see you were not looking for a handout, just a fair chance." "Still, I am grateful." They fell silent again, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind that happens between people who are becoming friends. Yates wanted to ask her more about her past, about what had driven her to leave Arkansas and start over in Indian Territory, but he sensed she was not ready to share that yet. So instead, he just sat beside her and watched the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. In the weeks that followed, a pattern developed. Yates would find Katherine on the porch in the evenings after her work was done, and they would talk. Small things at first, safe topics like the weather and the progress of Sarah's pregnancy and the amusing things the children had done that day. But gradually, as trust built between them, they began to share more. Katherine told him about growing up in Arkansas, about her parents who had died of fever when she was young, about being raised by an aunt who saw her more as free labor than family. She told him about the accident with the horse, how it had happened when she was helping at a neighbor's farm, how she had spent 6 months flat on her back while her hips slowly healed, how she had fought and clawed her way back to being able to walk. "The doctor said I should be grateful I was not paralyzed," she said one night, bitterness creeping into her voice. "As if I should be happy to spend the rest of my life in pain, dependent on a walking stick, looked at as broken by everyone I meet." "You are not broken," Yates said firmly. "You are one of the strongest people I have ever met." She looked at him with such surprise that he realized no one had ever said that to her before. "You really believe that?" "Of course I do." "You traveled alone to a new territory. You work from dawn to dusk without complaint. You have won over 3 wild children and made yourself indispensable in a matter of weeks. That is not broken, Katherine. That is extraordinary." Her eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. "Thank you." Yates, for his part, told her about his childhood, about watching his mother work herself to exhaustion, about the guilt he still carried that he had not been able to do more to help her. He told her about learning to work cattle, about the satisfaction of a good day's work, about his dreams of maybe having his own small spread someday. "Why have you not done it?" Katherine asked. "Saved up for your own ranch, I mean." "Money, mostly, and I suppose I have been comfortable here. Sam treats me well, gives me more responsibility every year. It has been easier to stay than to strike out on my own." "But is easy what you really want?" The question hung in the air between them. Yates realized she was right. He had been playing it safe, staying in the comfortable known rather than reaching for what he really wanted. It was a revelation that unsettled him. As summer deepened into the heat of August, Yates found himself thinking about Katherine constantly. The way she laughed at the children's antics, the way she hummed while she worked, the way her face lit up when she talked about the book she was reading to Emma. He was falling in love with her, and the realization both thrilled and terrified him. He had never been good with words, never been the kind of man who knew how to court a woman properly. But he found himself doing small things for her. He fixed the uneven floorboard in her room that caught on her walking stick. He brought her wildflowers from the prairie. He made sure the chair she sat in at mealtimes was the most comfortable one. He walked with her in the evenings, matching his pace to hers naturally, never rushing, never making her feel like she was slowing him down. Katherine noticed, of course. Yates could see the awareness growing in her eyes, the way she started to watch him when she thought he was not looking. But there was fear there too, a wariness that suggested she had been hurt before and was not sure she could risk it again. One Saturday, Sam gave everyone the day off. Sarah was feeling well enough to manage with just her husband's help, and she insisted that Katherine take a break. Yates saw his chance. "Would you like to come into town with me?" he asked Katherine that morning. "I need to pick up some supplies, and I thought you might enjoy getting out for a bit." She agreed, and they set off in the wagon together. It was a beautiful day, the heat tempered by a breeze, the sky clear and blue. As they rode, Yates found himself more nervous than he had been in years. He had decided he was going to tell Katherine how he felt. He could not keep it inside anymore. In town, they made their stops at the general store and the feed shop. Yates noticed the way people looked at them, at Katherine's limp and walking stick, and then at him beside her. He saw the questions in their eyes, the speculation. Let them wonder, he thought. He was proud to be seen with her. They were walking back to the wagon when they passed the small restaurant that had opened a few months earlier. On impulse, Yates stopped. "Would you like to have lunch?" he asked. "My treat." Katherine looked surprised. "You do not have to do that." "I know I do not have to. I want to, please." She smiled and his heart soared. "All right, thank you." They sat at a corner table and Yates ordered them both the special, which was chicken and dumplings. As they waited for their food, he found himself memorizing everything about this moment. The way Katherine looked in the dappled sunlight coming through the window, the way she folded her hands on the table, the way she smiled at him with such genuine warmth. "Katherine," he said, his voice coming out rougher than he intended, "I need to tell you something." She tilted her head, her expression curious but not guarded. "What is it?" "I have been thinking a lot these past few weeks. About my life, about what I want, about where I am going." He took a breath. "And I realized that all my thinking keeps circling back to you." Her eyes widened, but she did not speak, just waited for him to continue. "You are the strongest, bravest, most remarkable woman I have ever met," he said. "The way you face each day, the way you refuse to let your injury define you, the way you are so good with the children, the way you have brought light into the Thornton house and into my life. I am falling in love with you, Katherine. I think I have been since the moment I saw you step off that stage coach." For a long moment, she just stared at him. Then tears began to slide down her cheeks. "Yates," she whispered, "I am broken. I will never walk without a limp. I will always need a walking stick. I have days when the pain is so bad I can barely get out of bed. You deserve someone whole, someone who can give you a full life." He reached across the table and took her hands in his. "You are not broken. I wish you could see yourself the way I see you. Yes, you have a limp. Yes, you need a walking stick. But that is just part of who you are, like my dark hair or my crooked nose. It does not make you less. It does not make you unworthy of love. You do not know what you would be taking on," she said desperately. "There will be times when I cannot do things, when I need help, when I am a burden. Everyone needs help sometimes. That is not being a burden, that is being human. And Katherine, I want to be the one who walks beside you, not in front, not behind, but beside you. Always." She was crying in earnest now, but she had not pulled her hands away. "I am afraid," she admitted. "I am so afraid. My aunt used to tell me that no decent man would ever want me, that I was damaged goods. And then there was someone, back in Arkansas, who said he cared about me but then told everyone in town that I was trying to trap him because I knew no one else would have me. I left because I could not stand the way people looked at me, the pity and the judgment." Yates felt fury rise in him at the thought of someone treating her that way, but he kept his voice gentle. "I am not that man. I am not your aunt. I see you, Katherine, the real you, and what I see is someone I want to spend my life with if you will have me. Are you proposing?" She asked, her voice trembling. "Not yet," he said with a small smile. "I am courting you first. I want to do this right. But yes, eventually, if you will say yes when I do ask, I am going to marry you." She laughed through her tears. You are very sure of yourself. I am sure of us." Their food arrived then, interrupting the moment, but the air between them had changed. There was hope now, fragile but real. As they ate, Katherine told him more about what had driven her from Arkansas, about the cruelty of small-town gossip, about the loneliness of being seen as less than because of her injury. And Yates listened, his heart aching for all she had endured but also swelling with love for the strength it had taken her to keep going. After lunch, they walked through town together, Yates matching his pace to hers without thought. He showed her the little church, the schoolhouse, the new bank that had just opened. People nodded to them as they passed, and Yates made a point of introducing Katherine to everyone they met, his pride in being with her evident in every word. On the way back to the ranch, Katherine moved closer to him on the wagon seat, and Yates boldly put his arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him, and for the first time since her injury, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could be loved for who she was, limp and all. The next few months were the happiest of both their lives. Yates courted Katherine with steady devotion. He brought her small gifts, flowers and ribbons, and once a beautiful shawl he had ordered specially from a catalog. He read to her in the evenings, sitting beside her on the porch steps, their shoulders touching. He asked her about her dreams and actually listened to the answers. He made her feel seen and valued and cherished. Katherine bloomed under his attention. The wary, guarded woman who had arrived in Muskogee that summer day slowly transformed into someone more open, more hopeful. She laughed more, smiled more. She began to believe that maybe Yates was right, that her injury did not define her, that she could be loved. In September, Sarah Thornton gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Katherine helped with the delivery, staying calm and capable even when complications arose. Afterward, Sarah hugged her and said, "You are family now, Katherine. I hope you know that." It meant more to Katherine than Sarah could know. She had not had family, real family, in so long. One evening in late October, as the weather was just starting to turn cool, Yates took Katherine for a walk down by the creek that ran through the ranch property. The trees were turning gold and red, and the sunset painted everything in warm light. They walked slowly, Yates beside her, until they came to a spot where flat rocks made a natural seat beside the water. "Let us rest here for a minute," Yates said, and helped Katherine settle onto the rocks. He sat beside her, closer than usual, and took her hand. "Katherine Vaughn," he said, his voice serious but his eyes warm. "I have been thinking about what I said to you back in August, about wanting to do this right, to court you properly. I think I have done that. I have shown you how I feel, I have been patient, I have tried to prove to you that I am serious about us." "You have," she said softly. "You have been wonderful. Then I have something to ask you." He shifted, and to her shock, he slid off the rock and onto one knee in front of her. From his pocket, he pulled a simple gold band. "This was my mother's ring. It is the only thing I have of hers. I would be honored if you would wear it. Katherine, will you marry me?" She looked at him kneeling there, this good, kind man who had seen past her limp and her walking stick to the person she was inside. This man who had walked beside her gently through these months, never rushing her, never making her feel less than. This man who loved her, really loved her, not despite her injury but including it as part of the whole package of who she was. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, Yates, I will marry you." He stood and pulled her up into his arms, kissing her for the first time, and it was everything a first kiss should be, sweet and passionate and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, he slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. "I love you," he said. "I will love you every day for the rest of our lives." "I love you too," she replied. I did not think I could feel this way, that anyone would want me this way. Thank you for showing me I was wrong." "You are not wrong to be cautious," he said, cupping her face in his hands. "But I am going to spend the rest of our lives proving to you that you can trust me, that I will always be here, walking beside you." They returned to the ranch house hand in hand, and when they announced their engagement, the Thorntons were delighted. Sarah cried happy tears and immediately began planning the wedding. Sam shook Yates's hand and said, "You are a lucky man." "I know," Yates replied, looking at Katherine. "I am the luckiest man alive." They decided to marry in December, giving them time to prepare and to save a bit more money. Yates had been setting aside every penny he could, and he now had a plan. He had found a piece of land for sale, just 20 acres but with good grazing and a small house. It was not much, but it was a start. With the money he had saved and a small loan from the bank, he could buy it. They would have their own place, their own home to build a life in. When he told Katherine about it, she could hardly believe it. "Your own ranch," she said, her eyes shining. "Oh, Yates, that is wonderful. Our ranch," he corrected. "Everything I have, everything I am, it is ours now. We are partners in this life, Katherine. Equal partners." She had never expected to be anyone's partner, let alone an equal one. It was more than she had ever dared to dream. The weeks leading up to the wedding flew by. Katherine sewed her own dress, simple but beautiful, with help from Sarah and some of the other ranch wives. Yates worked extra hours to save more money and to make sure everything at the new property was ready for them to move in. They decided to have the ceremony at the little church in town, with just close friends and the Thornton family in attendance. December 15th, 1887, dawned cold but clear. Katherine woke in her small room off the kitchen for the last time, nerves and excitement warring in her stomach. Today, she would become Mrs. Yates Patterson. Today, she would start a new chapter of her life, one she had thought would never be possible. Sarah helped her dress, tears streaming down her face. "You look beautiful," she said. "Absolutely beautiful." Katherine looked at herself in the small mirror. The dress was simple, cream-colored with long sleeves and a modest neckline, but it fit her well and made her feel lovely. She had put her hair up in a softer style than her usual practical bun, and Sarah had woven in a few white ribbons. "I am getting married," Katherine said, the reality of it finally hitting her. "I am actually getting married." "To a wonderful man who loves you dearly," Sarah said, squeezing her hand. "You deserve this, Katherine. You deserve all the happiness in the world." At the church, Yates waited at the altar, Sam beside him as his best man. He wore his best suit, the one he saved for special occasions, and he had gotten a haircut and shaved carefully that morning. When the door opened and Katherine appeared, leaning on her walking stick with her other hand on Sam Thornton's arm since she had no father to walk her down the aisle, Yates felt his breath catch. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. She walked slowly toward him, her limp pronounced but her head held high, and when she reached him, he took her hand and whispered, "You look perfect." The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They spoke their vows in steady voices, promising to love and cherish each other in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, until death parted them. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Yates kissed his bride with such tenderness that several people in the small congregation wiped their eyes. Afterward, there was a small reception at the ranch, with food and music and dancing. Katherine could not dance, but Yates held her close and swayed with her to the music, his arms around her waist, her head on his shoulder. It was perfect. As the sun began to set, they said their goodbyes and climbed into the wagon that would take them to their new home. The Thorntons and the other guests waved as they drove away, and Katherine felt a swell of gratitude for the life she had found here, so different from the lonely existence she had known before. The house on their new property was small, just 3 rooms, but Yates had cleaned it thoroughly and brought in furniture he had been collecting for months. There was a real bed with a quilt his mother had made, a table and chairs, a stove, curtains on the windows. He had even built a special bench with a cushion where Katherine could sit and rest her leg when it pained her. "Welcome home, Mrs. Patterson," he said, lifting her in his arms and carrying her over the threshold despite her laughing protests. "Yates, put me down. You will hurt yourself." "You are light as a feather," he said, though that was not quite true. But he carried her to the bedroom and set her down gently on the bed. "This is our home now, our place to build a life together." Katherine looked around the simple room at the care he had taken to make it welcoming and felt tears prick her eyes. "It is perfect," she said. "Everything is perfect." Their wedding night was tender and sweet, 2 people who loved each other learning how to be together in this new way. Yates was patient and gentle, making sure Katherine was comfortable, that her leg was positioned so it would not pain her. And Katherine, who had thought no one would ever want her this way, discovered that being loved by someone who truly saw her was the most healing thing in the world. In the morning they woke wrapped in each other's arms. Yates kissed her forehead and said, "Good morning, wife." "Good morning, husband," she replied, still marveling at the words. They spent the day settling into their new home, arranging things, making plans. Yates showed Katherine the land, walking slowly beside her as she navigated the uneven ground with her walking stick. They had a few cattle already and chickens, and plans to expand gradually as they could afford it. "It is not much now," Yates said, "but we will build it up together. In a few years, this will be a real working ranch." "It is already perfect," Katherine said, "because we are here together." The first year of their marriage was hard work but deeply satisfying. They fell into a rhythm, each doing what they could to build their life. Katherine managed the house and the chickens and a large garden. She also took in sewing work from people in town, bringing in extra money. Yates worked the cattle and the land, often rising before dawn and working until dark. But no matter how tired he was, he always had time to sit with Katherine in the evening to talk about their day, to make plans for the future. On the hard days, when Katherine's leg pained her so badly she could barely walk, Yates would carry her to her cushioned bench and bring her whatever she needed so she would not have to move. He would massage her leg gently, easing the cramps and spasms. He never complained, never made her feel like a burden. He just loved her through it. On the hard days for him, when the work seemed endless and the money tight and the dream of a successful ranch seemed far away, Katherine would hold him and remind him of how far they had already come. She would make his favorite meals and tell him how proud she was of him. She believed in him, and that made all the difference. In the spring of 1888, Katherine discovered she was pregnant. She was terrified and elated in equal measure. She had always wanted children, but had not been sure her damaged body could carry a baby. When she told Yates, he picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down and apologized, worried he had been too rough. "I am not made of glass," she laughed. "But yes, we are going to have a baby." "A baby," he repeated, wonder in his voice. "Our baby." The pregnancy was not easy. Katherine's hip and leg caused complications, and there were days when the pain was nearly unbearable. The doctor in town was concerned, warning them that childbirth could be dangerous for Katherine given her injury. But she was determined, and Yates was beside her every step of the way, caring for her, encouraging her, never letting her face the fear alone. In November of that year, after a long and difficult labor, Katherine gave birth to a son. They named him James after Yates's father. He was small but healthy, with a strong cry and his mother's gray eyes. Yates held his son with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect," he said. "You are perfect. Thank you, Katherine. Thank you for our son." Katherine, exhausted but radiant, watched her husband cradle their baby and felt a joy so intense it was almost painful. This was her family. This was what she had traveled so far to find, what she had not even known she was looking for when she stepped off that stagecoach in Muskogee. The years that followed were full and rich. Little James grew strong and healthy, a bright, curious child who adored both his parents. In 1890, Katherine gave birth to a daughter they named Clara, who had her father's dark hair and ready smile. The ranch grew slowly but steadily until they had a decent herd of cattle and were making a real living. Yates became known in the area as a fair and honest rancher, someone who treated his animals well and kept his word. Katherine became known for her skill with a needle and her kindness. Despite her limp, she managed to keep up with two active children, the house, and her sewing work. People in town had stopped seeing her walking stick as a sign of weakness and started seeing it as just part of who she was, as natural as anything else. The Thorntons remained close friends. Sarah would often bring her children over to play with James and Clara, and the women would spend the afternoon talking while they watched the children. Sam and Yates helped each other with ranch work, and the two families celebrated holidays together. One evening in the summer of 1892, after the children were in bed, Katherine and Yates sat on the porch of their little house, watching the stars come out. She was leaning against him, his arm around her shoulders, her walking stick propped beside her chair. "Do you ever think about that day?" she asked. "The day I arrived in Muskogee, all the time," he said. "I think about how lucky I was that I happened to be in town that day, that I happened to be standing across the street when your stagecoach arrived. I think about how terrified I was," she admitted. "I had left everything I knew, I had almost no money, I had no idea what I was going to do, and then there you were." "There I was," he agreed softly. "You changed my life, Yates. You saved me." He turned to look at her, his expression serious. "No, Katherine, you saved yourself. You are the one who got on that stagecoach. You are the one who kept going when everything was hard. You are the one who proved every person who doubted you wrong. I just walked beside you." She smiled, that beautiful smile he had fallen in love with. "You did more than walk beside me. You walked with me through everything. Through the hard days and the good days, through pain and joy, through fear and hope. You never left my side." "I never will," he promised. "Until the day I die, I will be right here beside you." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life together despite what the world said was possible. Katherine's limp had not gone away, and she still needed her walking stick. Some days were harder than others. But she had learned that being loved did not require being perfect. That strength came in many forms, and that the right person would see past the surface to the heart beneath. And Yates had learned that true love meant walking beside someone gently through life, matching their pace, supporting without smothering, loving them exactly as they were. As the years went on, their family continued to grow. In 1894, Katherine gave birth to another son whom they named Thomas. The ranch prospered, and Yates was able to buy more land, expanding their holdings. The children grew healthy and strong, learning from both parents the values of hard work, kindness, and perseverance. James, their oldest, grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved working with his father on the ranch. Clara was bright and creative, always drawing or making up stories. Thomas was the wild one, fearless and energetic, keeping his mother on her toes. Catherine's leg continued to trouble her, especially as she got older, but she adapted. She learned her limits and worked within them. Some days she needed to rest more. Some days the pain was bad enough that Yates would take over her duties without being asked, caring for the children and the house while she lay down. But most days, she was able to do what needed to be done, and she found deep satisfaction in her life. The children never saw their mother's limp as anything unusual. To them, it was just how Mama walked, and the walking stick was as much a part of her as her gray eyes or her gentle voice. They did not pity her or see her as weak. They saw her as the strongest person they knew, the woman who kept their home running, who taught them their letters, who kissed their scrapes and told them stories and loved them fiercely. One day when James was about 10, he came home from school upset. Katherine was in the kitchen making bread, her walking stick leaning against the counter nearby. "Mama," he said, his young face troubled. "Billy Johnson said something mean today." "What did he say, sweetheart?" "He said that you were crippled, and that it was sad that Papa had to be married to someone like that." James looked at her with worry in his eyes. "Is Papa sad that you are his wife?" Catherine's heart clenched, but she kept her voice steady. "Come here, James." He came to her side, and she wiped the flour from her hands and put them on his shoulders. "Your father is not sad that I am his wife. He tells me every day how happy he is. Do you want to know the truth about my leg?" James nodded. "When I was younger, I had an accident that hurt my hip and leg very badly. It never healed quite right, so I walk with a limp and need a walking stick. Some people look at me and feel sorry for me, or think I am less than other people because I cannot walk the way they do. But your father never looked at me that way. From the very first day we met, he saw me, the real me, not just my limp. He loved me for who I am, and I love him for who he is. That is what real love is, James. It is seeing the whole person and loving all of them." "I think you are the best mama in the world," James said stoutly. "And I think Billy Johnson is stupid." Katherine smiled and kissed his forehead. "Thank you, sweetheart. And Billy is not stupid, he just does not understand yet. Maybe someday he will." When Yates came in that evening, Katherine told him about the conversation. He immediately went to find James, who was in the barn doing his chores. "Your mama told me what happened at school today," Yates said, sitting down on a hay bale. James looked worried that he was in trouble. "I did not hit Billy, even though I wanted to." "I am glad you did not hit him, but I want you to understand something, son. Your mother is the most remarkable woman I have ever known. Yes, she has a limp. Yes, she needs a walking stick. But those things do not make her weak or sad or anything to be pitied. They are just parts of her, like her gray eyes or the way she hums when she cooks. I fell in love with your mother not despite those things but including them, because they are part of what makes her who she is. And I am not sad. I am the happiest, luckiest man in the world because she chose to marry me." "I know, Papa," James said. "Mama is wonderful. She is. And James, you are going to meet people throughout your life who judge others by their appearance, who see a limp or a scar or a difference and think that makes someone less. Do not be like those people. Always look deeper. Always see the person, not just the surface." "I will, Papa." As the children grew older, they each learned this lesson in their own way. They saw how their father treated their mother with unfailing respect and tenderness, how he would help her without making her feel helpless, how he admired her strength. They saw how their mother never let her injury stop her from doing what was important, how she found ways to accomplish what she needed to despite the limitations of her body. They learned that love was active, that it showed itself in daily actions and choices, that it was patient and kind and steadfast. In 1900, when James was 12, Clara was 10, and Thomas was 6, Yates surprised Katherine with a gift. He had been working on it in secret for months, with the help of a craftsman in town. It was a new walking stick, made of beautiful polished walnut with silver inlay, and at the top where her hand would rest, he had carved their initials intertwined. "Yates," she breathed when he presented it to her. "It is beautiful. I wanted you to have something special," he said. "Something that showed that your walking stick is not something to hide or be ashamed of. It is part of who you are, and I love every part of you." She ran her fingers over the smooth wood, over the intricate carving. "I will treasure this always." "As I treasure you," he replied, pulling her close. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows. In 1903, Sam Thornton died suddenly of a heart attack, leaving Sarah a widow. Katherine and Yates helped her through the grief, and their friendship deepened even more. Sarah eventually moved to town and opened a small boarding house, finding a new purpose in caring for travelers passing through. The children grew into young adults. James decided he wanted to be a rancher like his father and stayed to help work the land. Clara surprised them all by announcing she wanted to be a teacher and went to the territorial capital to attend normal school. Thomas, true to his wild nature, talked about heading west to see the ocean. In 1907, when Katherine was 40 and Yates was 44, they celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. Their children had organized a surprise party, inviting everyone from the surrounding area. The little ranch house that had once seemed so small was bursting with friends and neighbors, all of whom had come to honor the couple who had become fixtures in the community. At one point in the evening, someone called for a speech. Yates stood, pulling Katherine up beside him despite her protests. 20 years ago, he said, his voice carrying across the crowded room, I was standing outside a saloon in Muskogee when a stagecoach pulled up. A woman stepped out and something about her caught my attention. She had a limp and a walking stick, and she held her head high despite the pain I could see she was in. I did not know then that she would become my wife, the mother of my children, my partner in everything. But I am grateful every day that I was there that afternoon, that I had the courage to speak to her, that she gave me a chance. He turned to Katherine, taking her hand. You have made me happier than I ever thought possible. You have given me a family, a home, a life worth living. Your strength inspires me every day. I love you more now than I did the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. Here is to 20 more years and 20 after that, and all the years God grants us. There was not a dry eye in the house. Katherine, crying but smiling, stood on her tiptoes to kiss her husband as everyone applauded. Later, when the guests had gone and it was just the two of them cleaning up, Katherine said, I never imagined my life would turn out like this. When I left Arkansas, I was running away, not toward anything. I had no hope, no plan beyond surviving, and then you were there. I was exactly where I needed to be, Yates said. We both were. Do you really think we will have another 20 years? He pulled her close, his arms around her waist. I think we will have as many years as fate allows, and I will cherish every single day of them. You are my heart, Katherine. You always have been from that first moment. As they stood there in their kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had built together, Katherine thought about the girl she had been, broken and scared, arriving in a strange town with nothing but a carpet bag and a walking stick. She thought about how Yates had seen her, really seen her when so many others had looked past her or dismissed her. She thought about the life they had created, the children they had raised, the love they shared. Her leg still hurt. She still needed her walking stick. Those facts had not changed. But everything else had. She was not broken. She was not less than. She was loved, cherished, valued. She was a wife, a mother, a friend. She was strong, and through it all, Yates had walked beside her gently through life, never pushing, never pulling, just being there, steady and true. In 1912, Clara returned from teaching in Oklahoma City with news that she was engaged to a kind young lawyer named Peter. The wedding was held at the ranch, with Clara looking radiant and Katherine crying happy tears. Thomas, now 18, had decided to stay closer to home after all, finding work on a neighboring ranch and courting the daughter of a local merchant. James, at 24, had taken over much of the day-to-day running of the ranch, allowing Yates to slow down a bit. Yates was 50 now, his hair graying at the temples, his hands showing the wear of years of hard work. Katherine was 45, moving more slowly than she once had, her walking stick an even more necessary companion, but they were happy. They would sit together in the evenings on the porch they had added to the house, watching the sunset, talking about their day, making plans for the grandchildren they hoped would come. Yates would reach over and take Katherine's hand, and she would squeeze back, and no words would be needed. They understood each other completely. Their first grandchild arrived in 1913, a boy Clara named William. Katherine traveled to Oklahoma City to help with the birth and the first few weeks, and holding her grandson, she felt her heart expand even further. This was her legacy, this next generation, raised by a daughter who had learned from watching her parents that love was patient and kind, that it endured, that it saw past surfaces to souls. James married in 1914, a sweet girl named Mary from a nearby ranch. They moved into a small house on the Patterson property, planning to eventually take over the ranch completely when Yates was ready to retire. Thomas married his merchant's daughter, Ruth, the following year, and they settled in town where Thomas opened a livery stable. As 1918 rolled around, bringing with it news of war in Europe and changes sweeping across the country, Katherine and Yates found themselves surrounded by family. They had 3 children, all married, and 4 grandchildren with another on the way. The ranch was prospering under James's capable management. They had more than they had ever dreamed of that day in 1887, when they had married and moved into their small house with such big hopes. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching their grandchildren play in the yard while their children supervised, Katherine said, "We have been blessed, you and I." "We have," Yates agreed. "More than I ever thought possible. When I was young, after my injury, I thought my life was over. I thought I would never be anything more than the girl with the limp, pitied or ignored. I never imagined this." She gestured at the scene before them. "All of this. You did this," Yates said. "You created this life. You had the courage to start over, to keep going when it would have been easier to give up. You built this family, this home. I just walked beside you." "You did more than walk beside me," she said, echoing words she had spoken years before. "You loved me. You showed me I was worthy of love. You gave me the courage to believe in myself. Without you, none of this would exist." He took her hand, the same gesture he had made thousands of times over their 31 years of marriage. "We did it together. That is what partnership means." As the sun set and their children called the grandchildren in for supper, Yates helped Katherine stand, handing her the beautiful walking stick he had made for her all those years ago. Together, they walked slowly into the house. His pace matched to hers, his hand at her elbow, not to support her but just to be close. Inside, the house was warm and full of life. Their children and grandchildren gathered around the big table that had been extended with extra boards to accommodate everyone. There was laughter and conversation, the passing of dishes, the comfortable chaos of a large family meal. Katherine looked around the table, at the faces of the people she loved most in the world, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. This was what she had found in Muskogee all those years ago. Not just a job or a place to live, but a home. A real home, with a man who loved her, children who adored her, a life that had meaning and purpose. After supper, when the children had taken the grandchildren home and it was just Katherine and Yates again, they prepared for bed in the comfortable routine of long marriage. Yates helped Katherine with the buttons on her dress that her stiff fingers had trouble with. She helped him remember where he had left his reading glasses. They moved around each other with the easy familiarity of two people who had shared space for decades. In bed, Yates pulled Katherine close, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her. "I love you," he said, as he did every night. "I love you too," she replied, as she always did. "Thank you for saying yes," he said. "Thank you for marrying me, for building this life with me, for giving me a family. Thank you for seeing me," she whispered, "for looking past my limp and my walking stick and seeing the person I was inside. Thank you for walking beside me through everything." "Always," he promised. "Always." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed. Outside, the wind rustled through the prairie grass, and the stars shone down on the little ranch they had built together, on the life they had created against all odds. Years continued to pass. Katherine's hip and leg caused her more trouble as she aged, and there were days when she could barely walk even with her stick. But Yates was always there, helping her without making her feel helpless, loving her through the pain, reminding her that she was still the same strong woman he had fallen in love with. Yates developed arthritis in his hands, making ranch work difficult. But James had fully taken over operations, and Yates was able to step back without feeling like he was abandoning his responsibilities. He spent his days with Katherine, reading to her, talking with her, just being with her. Their grandchildren grew and great-grandchildren arrived. The family expanded and flourished, all of them carrying forward the lessons Katherine and Yates had taught through their example. Love was not just a feeling but an action. It was choosing every day to be kind, to be patient, to be there for each other. It was seeing past the surface to the soul beneath. It was walking beside someone gently through life, matching their pace, supporting without smothering, loving them exactly as they were. In the spring of 1926, Katherine fell ill. It started as a cough but developed into pneumonia. The doctor came out from town, but there was not much he could do. At 61, with her body already weakened by years of chronic pain, Katherine did not have much fight left in her. Yates sat by her bedside day and night, holding her hand, reading to her, talking to her even when she was too weak to respond. Their children came, bringing the grandchildren and great-grandchildren to say goodbye. The little house was full of people who loved her, people whose lives she had touched, people who existed because she had had the courage to step off a stagecoach in Muskogee 39 years before. On a warm May evening, with Yates holding her hand and their children gathered around, Katherine Patterson took her last breath. She died peacefully, surrounded by love, leaving behind a legacy that would continue for generations. Yates was devastated. For 39 years, Katherine had been his partner, his love, his reason for getting up in the morning. Without her, the world felt empty, but he was not alone. His children rallied around him, making sure he was cared for, that he ate, that he had company. The grandchildren visited often, and the great-grandchildren would climb into his lap and ask him to tell them stories about Grandma Katherine. And he would tell them. He would tell them about the day she arrived in Muskogee, stepping off the stagecoach with her limp and her walking stick. He would tell them how he had fallen in love with her strength, her determination, her refusal to be defined by her injury. He would tell them about their life together, the hard times and the good times, the way they had built something beautiful out of nothing. "Your grandma was the strongest person I ever knew," he would say. "She never let anything stop her, and she taught all of us what real love looks like. It is not about finding someone perfect. It is about finding someone real and choosing to love them every single day." Yates lived for 3 more years after Katherine's death. He spent those years surrounded by family, watching his legacy continue to grow. He saw more great-grandchildren born, saw his granddaughter Clara's daughter graduate from college, the first in the family to do so. He saw the ranch continue to prosper under James's care. But mostly, he missed Katherine. He missed her voice, her laugh, the way she would look at him like he was the only person in the world who mattered. He missed sitting with her on the porch in the evenings, her hand in his. He missed walking beside her, matching his pace to hers. In the summer of 1929, Yates Patterson died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 66. His children buried him beside Katherine in the little cemetery in Muskogee, under a big oak tree. The stone they placed over their graves read simply, "Katherine and Yates Patterson. They walked through life together." The ranch stayed in the family for generations. James passed it to his son, who passed it to his. The house was expanded and modernized, but the original 3 rooms were preserved, a testament to where it all began. Katherine's beautiful walking stick was kept in a place of honor, a symbol of the strength and determination that had founded the family. And the story was told and retold, passed down through the generations. The story of Katherine, who arrived in Muskogee with a limp and a walking stick, and Yates, the cowboy who had walked beside her gently through life. The story of 2 people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life together despite what the world said was possible, who had loved each other with a love that was patient and kind and enduring. Their great-great-grandchildren would visit the ranch and ask to hear the story again. And their descendants would tell it, making sure that Katherine and Yates were never forgotten, that their legacy of love and strength and partnership continued to inspire. Because that is what true love does. It endures. It lasts beyond death, beyond years, beyond generations. It becomes part of the fabric of a family, a foundation on which everything else is built. And somewhere, in some place beyond this world, Katherine and Yates Patterson walked together still, her hand in his pace matched to hers, walking beside each other gently through eternity. The end.